Back to the 70s, why food prices are higher than ever. The high cost of a supermarket shop means inflation last month still hit double figures. It is going down, but not as quickly as predicted. So what will the government do now?
The really worrying point was the fact that food inflation has increased yet again, up to over 19%. And I think that's the one where people really feel it all the time.
Also this lunchtime, two mothers who died from herpes after being treated by the same surgeon. An inquest opens into their deaths. Is it the end of the line for Transpennine Express? After delays and cancellations, the Transport Secretary is pushed to not renew the train company's contract. Going green, the restaurant chain taking steak off the menu will ask its celebrity chef founder why. And Netflix DVD, the final season, why the streaming giant is stopping a service you probably thought was scrapped years ago.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. How the rising cost of cheese could put your mortgage up. Forecasters had predicted the rate of inflation was set to go below 10%. But figures out today show instead UK inflation was still in double figures last month, though it has fallen to 10.1% from 10.4%. But why has it not fallen further? Well, it's because of rising food prices. The overall average price of food and non-alcoholic drinks is now 19% higher than the same time last year, the sharpest annual increase since 1977. So what's the government's response and what does it mean for the Bank of England's decision on interest rates next month? This report from Neil Connery.
As a working mum with 3 children, Kate Warby knows firsthand the impact of inflation. She says it's a struggle to keep meeting rising bills and isn't surprised inflation remains high.
At the beginning of all the crisis sort of thing, we were really cutting back on our shopping and really being careful with what we have, doing our meal plans, things like that. And now we just sort of think, well, we can't really cut back anymore without jeopardising, nutritional value and things like that.
In shops, homes and workplaces across the country, the cost of living crisis continues to be felt. The latest inflation figure is 10.1%, above what economists had predicted. But the rate at which prices are rising is slowing, and the Chancellor insisted this morning the government's plan is on course.
It shows that there is no such thing as an automatic fall in the headline rate of inflation. That's why we have a plan, and if we're going to reduce that pressure on families, it's absolutely essential that we stick to that plan and we see it through so that we halve inflation this year.
The fall isn't as dramatic as hoped, and that's largely down to food inflation hitting year-on-year highs of 19.6%. Milk, cheese and eggs are up by nearly a third. The price of meat is up by nearly 20%, and so is the cost of bread and cereals. But overall, increases were partly offset by lower fuel, with petrol and diesel costs down nearly 6% against the same month last year, after prices had spiked following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
They were already queuing as the bread shops opened this morning.
The last time food prices soared like they've done now was back in August 1977, during a baker's strike, as the economy suffered an inflationary backdrop.
I think the really worrying point was the fact that food inflation has increased yet again, up to over 19%. And I think that's the one where people really feel it all the time, and every part of society in the UK feels it.
UK inflation remains higher than the US, Germany, France and Italy. The Bank of England forecasts it will fall back by the end of the year. But today's figures are a painful reminder of how stubborn a problem it remains. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Let's get more from our political correspondent Shihab Khan. The Chancellor says this problem, high inflation, is a global problem. How do we compare to other countries?
It is a global problem, but the figures mean that the UK is the worst record in Western Europe. It's the only country that has inflation above 10%. Neil touched on it there. The countries that we would usually compare ourselves to, Germany, they're at 7.8%, France is at 6.6%, even the United States, which is not in Western Europe, of course, their inflation is half our rate. Why? There's a number of reasons why. Mainly it's because of our reliance on gas in particular. We know there's been a spike in those prices because of the war in Ukraine. The government has stepped in and subsidised energy prices. That influences and impacts inflation. We import a lot of our food. There have been food shortages. That impacts inflation. And then there's a worker shortage, which experts are saying is partly because of Brexit. All of these things combined mean that in the UK at the moment it is slightly worse than compared to the countries that we would usually compare ourselves against.
Where does that all leave the government then?
Well, the Prime Minister's been open that his ambition is to try and see inflation cut in half by the end of the year. The Bank of England's official target is to get it to 2%, plus or minus 1%. Now, the OBR forecast, the official forecast that we have at the moment, suggests that it will probably get to around 2.9% by the end of the year. That will reach both of those targets. But with any of these things, you have to look at these things in the long term. Ultimately, the Bank of England will be responsible for dealing with interest rate rises and manipulating interest rates to try and get that down. But you have to look at this in the long term. It's very difficult to predict these things.
Shihab, thank you very much. Thank you. A long-awaited inquest began today into the deaths of two new mothers who died from herpes after they were treated by the same surgeon. The families of Kimberly Sampson and Samantha Mulcahy had to campaign to get the case heard. Ellie Pitt is in Maidstone, where the inquest is taking place. Ellie, what's been heard this morning?
Well, Nina, this morning we've heard from a consultant obstetrician who was involved in the care of Samantha Mulcahy both before and after her caesarean section to deliver her baby. The court heard that Samantha had kidney failure and a diagnosis of preeclampsia, and so doctors decided to carry out a C-section. Dr. Etikowu told the court that he would have expected her symptoms to improve inside 72 hours, but they didn't, and Samantha became more and more unwell. Dr. Etikowu told the court that he didn't suspect a herpes infection and that in his 30 years of practice, Samantha's case is the only one of herpes infection that he's seen. It eventually caused her death. 6 weeks earlier, another woman, Kimberly Sampson, contracted herpes and died at a different Kent hospital. Now, Dr. Etikowu told the court that he didn't know Kimberly Sampson's cause of death was herpes infection, and if he had, he would have ordered a test to be run for the virus on his patient, Samantha Mulcahy. Now, initially, neither women were going to have inquests into their death, but in 2021, an investigation found that both their C-sections had been performed by the same surgeon who can't be named for legal reasons. Both women's families are in court today, and Miss Mulcahy's mother became upset as she listened to the evidence this morning. They have fought for nearly 5 years for these inquests, which are expected to conclude next week.
Ellie Pitt, thank you. MPs have pushed the Transport Secretary for a decision on whether he'll renew the contract of one of the country's worst performing train companies, Transpennine. Passengers across northern England and into Scotland have suffered continuous delays and cancellations over the past year. Today, Mark Harper was asked how he could realistically be considering extending Transpennine's contract, which runs out next month. He replied, no option is off the table. Sangeeta Lal is at Victoria Station in Manchester. Just how bad are the trains run by Transpennine Express?
It's an operator that's faced heavy criticism. The Transpennine Express operates between major towns and cities here, from Leeds to Manchester, Liverpool, up to Newcastle and up to Scotland. But between February and March, more than 1,700 cancellations were recorded. That totalled 10% of all cancellations across England and Wales. Now, it's led to mayors across here calling it a betrayal of passengers in the north, and they're also calling for the government not to renew its contract with them. Now, the cancellations have led to widespread delays too, the government citing strike action as one of the reasons, but trade unions have told me that the other reason is simply a shortage of drivers, and also drivers that aren't willing to work paid overtime shifts. Well, the Select Committee questioned Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, about this today. He acknowledged that the experience for passengers has been horrendous, but he said that all options are still on the table.
We're not going to see that level of service improvement and number of people coming back on the passengers unless we have some innovation in customer service, and I think that's best delivered by the private sector. But
it's not being
but that's in
order.
Well,
in the system.
Some of
the system. It takes us all for a ride.
No,
well, not taking us all for a ride because we can't even get the trains.
Well, no, I don't think that's fair, and I think some of the operators are performing very well. But look, it's been very difficult during the pandemic. There was a massive reduction in rail usage.
So what are the options? Well, the government can either extend its contract with First Group, which runs the company. They can put it out to tender for another company to take on, or the government can take over itself. Whatever happens, people here just want to see improvements soon.
Sangeeta Lal, thank you very much. So Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of living in another world to the rest of us when it comes to the state of public services. The Labour leader said Rishi Sunak can't see the damage that has been done because he doesn't use the same public services as the rest of us. Attacked over the NHS, crime and immigration, Rishi Sunak defended the government's record. Our political correspondent Libby Vina was watching in the Houses of Parliament. Libby, take us through what was said.
Yes, well, a general election may be more than a year away, but local elections are looming, and the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition today seem to be drawing up their battle lines for that contest. The Prime Minister saying that the Conservatives had cut crime, Keir Starmer saying the opposite was true and ridiculing a suggestion by the Tory party chairman that public services generally were in pretty good shape.
He's living in another world to the rest of us. People waiting more than 2 days from an ambulance because they broke the NHS. Only 1 in 100 rapists going to court because they broke the criminal justice system. A record number of small boats crossing the Channel because they broke the asylum system. Does that really sound like pretty good shape to him?
Mr. Speaker, what's the record? Since 2010, crime down by 50% under the Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. 20,000 more police officers, we've given them more powers, and we've toughened up sentencing, all opposed by Sir Softy over there.
Well, a rather personal jibe there at Sir Keir Starmer by the Prime Minister, hoping perhaps that voters do have long memories and remember when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. Equally, Labour seem to be trying to pin the blame for whatever has gone wrong in the last 13 years on Rishi Sunak, even though he has only been Prime Minister for less than a year.
Talking about public services, there's more pressure on the NHS as it was announced today that some ambulance workers will go out on strike as some nurses next month.
Yes, another headache looming for the NHS and the government. The Unite union, ahead of the results of the ballot of its members on the government's pay offer, has announced strikes. It assumes that its members have voted against the deal, joining the RCN in that. And there will now be a joint strike, if they are right about the ballot result, a joint strike on May the 2nd. That comes just 2 days before the local elections.
Libby Vina, thank you. Still to come, the tech that could transform the lives of Parkinson's patients. And the end of the DVD era as Netflix ditches the disc. Next, this lunchtime, why steak is coming off the menu at a famous restaurant chain. The award-winning celebrity chef Thomasina Myers created the Mexican street food brand Oaxaca after winning MasterChef. But now, it's all change on the menu, I'm delighted to say. She joins me now. Thanks for talking to us this lunchtime. Why this move? Why now?
So we have had a long history of thinking about what we put on our menu. We've always cared a lot about climate and the environment and how we can impact that. So, for instance, since really we opened our doors, we were recycling our food waste. We started with about 35% of our menu was vegetarian. It's now 50% vegetarian. and we've been carbon neutral for about 7 years now. So it's something we've always engaged with a lot. You know, how can we lessen our footprint whilst also producing the most delicious options for our customers? And I think our customers really engage with that. I mean, our vegetarian options are delicious and mouthwatering, and it gives people a choice. And so when we were looking at, when we were told we had to put calories on our menu, we took that opportunity to actually put carbon counting on our menu. And what it highlighted for us was that beef was one of the highest ratings for carbon. But the situation is way more interesting and goes deeper than that. And so we started looking about the cuts of beef we were actually using on our menu. The delicious steak tacos we were producing, we're using skirt steak. And for that cut, we needed to use hundreds of animals every week. Whereas now we're moving first of all to brisket, and then the next couple of weeks we're testing bringing in a whole half of an animal, which will mean we can go down to using just 6 animals every week, rather than the hundreds that would be needed just for that particular cut.
So you've calculated
the
impact on what it could mean in terms of your carbon footprint. Have you calculated the risks to your bottom line that some customers who really like, for example, the steak tacos you're talking about, will just try to go elsewhere, will try to get them elsewhere?
Well, the amazing thing is our new slow-cooked beef and grilled cheese taco has been on the menu for 2 weeks, and the sales are far outpassing our skirt steak taco. So it's absolutely delicious. We think it's actually a better taco. But more interestingly, we can buy the cows from regenerative farms. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put into our supply chain food that's from better farmers and better farms that are looking after the environment, investing in soil, investing in biodiversity. Because we want to not just think about carbon, we want to think about the actual biodiversity and soil that goes into better farming. So we're looking at better farming systems and better ingredients on our menu. And what's really exciting is that we can put more delicious food on the menu at the same time as doing it.
OK, Thomasina Myers, thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime. Thank you. Next, how tech could help people with Parkinson's. A device that could potentially improve the mobility of people with the disease is being trialled on inpatients at the Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge. The wearable tech is called Q1 and is placed on the sternum of the chest. The vibrations it delivers are intended to improve unwanted movement. Matthew Hudson has been at the hospital finding out how it works and how it could help doctors discharge patients early.
Well, yes, patients here at Addenbrooke's Hospital on C4 ward are amongst those who are helping to trial this, the Q1. It's attached to a patient's sternum and it helps to alleviate some of the most dreadful symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And the trial here at Addenbrooke's is the first in the hospital in the country. Now, Dr. Ali Mackett is an expert on Parkinson's and is one of those running these trials. Dr. Mackett, just tell us how it works.
So this device, it's a fairly simple device that applies vibrotactile stimulation to the chest, to the sternum, and we believe that that alters some of the brain waves that are abnormal in Parkinson's disease. So by changing these brain waves, we make patients into a more ready-to-move state. So we see a change in their stiffness, sometimes their tremor, their slowness of movement, and we improve their gait, so their walking, their unsteadiness. It can help a whole host of symptoms. And it's a safe intervention, so there's very few side effects with this device. We have seen that people could use it in addition to what they're already taking. And the aim is to see if we can get people home from hospital more quickly, back to their own environments, help them engage more with physiotherapy and help them recover quicker. Because we know it's a very common condition. There's about 145,000 people in the UK with Parkinson's disease, and thousands of people are admitted every year with falls and mobility problems associated with Parkinson's. So anything that we can do to help would be a real game changer.
Dr. Mackett, thank you very much indeed. More trials will be taking place here at Addenbrooke's in Cambridgeshire, but the implications for sufferers of Parkinson's could really be very profound.
Matthew Hudson reporting there. Finally, the end of a viewing era. After 25 years, the time has come for Netflix DVD, the final season. The streaming giant, believe it or not, is still posting out films to some people's homes around the world. But it's now announced its rental service will cease in September. The disc to your door delivery was our first experience of on-demand movie watching, but soon it'll just be part of film history. Faye Barker has more.
Say Netflix and you'll probably think of the streaming service that's changed viewing habits. But when the company started out in the United States in the late 90s, it sent out DVDs of films and TV series for people to rent from home. A quarter of a century on, though, those changing habits mean the service is being wound down, with Netflix due to ship its last DVD in the autumn. The company's co-chief executive said, "Our goal has always been to provide the best service for our members, but as the business continues to shrink, that's going to become increasingly difficult."
It's showtime.
The horror comedy Beetlejuice was the first DVD shipped by Netflix in 1998. And over 25 years, it sent out more than 5 billion DVDs to its customers. Now, though, the DVD seems to have had its day.
Netflix basically started out in a garage in Los Angeles, sending out discs, but people really aren't using DVD players anymore. So it kind of boils down to the fact that the demand has dwindled, and the DVD sort of legacy side of their business is really these days accounts for a really tiny fraction of Netflix's overall business.
The rise of online DVD rentals helped cause the downfall of rental stores like Blockbuster.
Love film?
Yes. Postal rental services here in the UK, like Love Film, have also now been mostly swallowed up by streaming services.
It's nice.
However, there are still ways to rent DVDs for a monthly fee, even if it is becoming increasingly niche to want to have an actual disc in your hand. Faye Barker, ITV News.
That's all we've got time for so far today. Mary is here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. From everyone here for now, bye-bye.